I like the idea of the soil and what the biology that's going on in the soil. The whole universe that's down there. There's a whole universe of insects and microorganisms and all that stuff that lives down there that are all basically part of a pyramid that humans are on above, and that we're all. So all those things that are down in the soil will affect us all in the end. You know what I mean? So that's what affects all of the pests. When pesticide, throws everything out of balance. The earth was created with a balance for everything. You know what I mean? And yeah, there's maybe good things and good things go bad and things that happen in nature and stuff that put the earth to have to put it back into balance again. But, when you start to use a lot of chemicals and disrupt those pesticides and hurt the bees that are so important for propagation, and so how are you going to change that? People should be jumping up and down to change it,
Our potential, it's exponential.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another podcast of Abundant Souls. Today, I have a soil scientist, an amazing, profound wealth of knowledge, David Disbrow. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, no, exciting.
I wish we had the camera on the last 30 minutes while we're getting set up. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you do and your company.
Well, it's about 20 years ago, I had changed a little bit in my life. I've always been involved with agronomical things and growing and maintaining things in the lawn and landscape and golf world. And I said, I wanted to start looking at a way to bring, things that were going to be powerful to the soil, amending it by making it a better medium to grow, and whether it's on a golf course or whether it's on a home lawn or wherever it is, And so that was always, to me, where we could get where do we get that we can put back into the soil to make the soil grow on its own naturally instead of pouring chemicals and fertilizers on it.
When did you start thinking about these things, man?
Well, I probably was involved with this probably around 2001, 2002. That's where I really got kind of into this, where the organics, I could see that the organics was really important. We were looking at different types of ways and different organics that's out there. And, we saw that there was, some interesting, highly decomposed carbon products that are out in nature, that are kind of difficult to harvest, but they're really wonderful because if you can add them to the soil. But they're not readily available, and they're not, because nature doesn't always create those things, But kind of in a way, the soils in Belglade here are kind of representative of that. You have 1 million years of the Everglades here, where created from the decomposition of the reeds and stuff that was in the Everglades out there, the rich black soil that's out in the Pahokee and the Belglades area, which is probably, I would say, some of the richest soil on the planet. And that's
black gold.
Yeah, and black gold. When you say that, is that the darker the soil, the richer the carbon content. The richer the carbon content, the better the biology is that the soil can create.
That's it.
Yeah.
The darker the soil, the richer, and the more carbon content in there.
Right. Yeah.
So tell people about that. Walk people through that, because they're like, oh, you get carbon out from nature and apply it as inputs to the land, back in the land. You're saying, what is that carbon? Like what you said. Well, carbon in the soil, carbon in nature.
Well, think about plants. When I discovered in Florida that there was literally millions of tons in south from I-4 south, there's probably 4 or 5 million tons of green waste, which is your yard waste that everybody collects every day, and puts it out by the road, and then the city comes and picks it up and takes it and throws it in the landfill. And I said, well, that million tons of stuff is just a huge resource. And I said, if I can figure out a way to aggregate that, I can then start to put it to use, because unless you can aggregate a lot of it, you can't really do anything with it. It's just too minimal. You know what I mean? And I always looked on a pretty much of a larger scale, that I said, well, if we're going to create a replacement fertilizer system versus an NPK fertilizer system, we'd have to look at how we could do that through the use of nature's carbon and micronutrients that's involved in these plants.
And was it successful? Did you how did it come to be?
Well, there was a lot of time we spent on looking at, because investment people and money doesn't come into a project unless you can have all the dots, and people.
How do I get my
capital
money
investment? Back? Yeah, and so whenever anything is experimental or exploratory, it's in some of the higher sciences, they get the funding much easier. Where in our market, they think that the yield or the return wouldn't be as great enough, so it's difficult to do that. So trying to get that initial money, we had to show that we could aggregate the feedstock, which is the supply of the green waste to our operation.
And aggregate that. And it's genius. By the way, guys, that's it, man. People are thinking about that today. So I got to ask you, because you've been doing it, you're selling soil, you're doing all these amazing things, working with all these companies, people don't even know. Yeah. And you can maybe talk a little bit about that. But after doing this for several decades, is it profitable using it as a resource?
It's extreme. But I think that overall it will be not profit is a way that you look at two things. It's is it just profit of money monetarily, or is it profit that we benefit from it in a lot of ways,
Yes.
And so
there's other ways we could profit from it, like the next generation having clean water. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that we had to look at, when I looked at Franklin Roosevelt said, after the Dust Bowl of the 1930s or 40s, he said that a country that destroys its soil destroys itself. And that's a quote from Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So we have to, and I thought to myself, I said, well, that's pretty interesting. And there's even different passages in the Bible and everything else about how important our soil is, And I said, well, if we're going to continue for generations and generations to be able to grow our own food and do that, we have to figure out how we stop losing it. We're losing soil on a massive rate.
And just get ahead of these problems like you're talking about.
Well, you have to figure out what you want to do is put back in the soil what you're losing through the process of farming. It just should be a natural cycle that just goes around and around. And
why do we lose that, David? Because you work with all these growers, isn't that obvious?
I think that you go back to the chemical companies when petroleum was discovered in the early 1900s. Things changed in this world, changed dramatically. It created, the only good thing, I think one of the good things is we stopped killing whales for oil back then. But
we're using petroleum fertilizers, change agriculture.
Well, that was a big breakthrough. Before, we had a lot of difficulty in nitrogen came pretty much from Chile and in Peru, where they had the Chilean nitrate, calcium nitrate, or saltpeter that they would get, which would be used as a nitrogen. So that was a big industry that they would get to sell to farmers. And then when we discovered the way to crack and produce ammonium nitrate, it changed everything, and it just ramped it up. And they were doing that with the low cost of fossil fuels. They were able to create the ammonium nitrate, and so,
which is just, by the way, for it's bioavailable. For the plant, so it's instant.
Well, that's right.
Steroids for that.
Well, yeah, because if plants in nature, everybody looks around you. You have plants everywhere, that are growing, that aren't in your yard, that aren't in a garden, that are growing naturally. Redwood trees are massive and huge and have never been fed an ounce of nitrogen, And so that you always have to ask yourself, well, how does this happen in nature that all these plants are able to grow to this huge extent and not have people pouring nitrogen on them? And so I think that everything propagates itself, and so when people got we get addicted to certain things, and when we found out that we could get it to grow faster, but the biggest problem with ammonium nitrates and synthetic fertilizers is that they tap down the natural biology in the soil, so that they basically create more of a dependency upon the synthetic fertilizers. Instead of the plant having to go and get it from the soil. You know what I mean? Because it's just
It's a
being
weaker soil biome.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they get that, and then they become dependent on it, because now they don't have to put out roots. They don't have to put those roots out, those deep roots, and that hampers them, because then when they go into a drought, they didn't put the roots out that they needed to get the water or hold more water. So they become less drought tolerant and everything else. So I think that's the, it's always what I call a domino effect. You know what I mean? It's just like this caused this to happen, it caused this to happen, so just on the same side of that, if we have a positive domino, you know what I mean, that we do this, we sequester carbon, we put nutrients back into the soil, we get this, and we end up with clean water. We do it the other way, we end up with dirty water, we'd end up with dirty environment. This way we end up with a clean environment, clean water, and everything else. So it's just which way you're going to do it, and I think I think we're at a tipping point now in that people are realizing it. There's so many people that are into putting gardens in their own homes, as you do, and that people are relatively unknowledgeable about the importance of soil and soil and sequestration. About carbon sequesters more CO out of our atmosphere than probably any other way.
Man, preach. Yeah, that's what we're here to do today, David. That's why you're here. I really appreciate it. Guys, amazing. Would you say you're a pioneer in like the soil, like doing that, using yard waste as a resource in like our area?
Well, I think it's been coming along. I mean, maybe in some ways we've been farther ahead on doing it, but now other people are following our lead and coming along. And so I would hope that we would do this in a massive scale, because currently we use about 40 million tons of synthetic fertilizer a year in the United States. And we need to incorporate that. Even if we can't eliminate it, we need to incorporate carbon into that fertilization system, so that we can at least, in the process of fertilization, that we could do is start to incorporate the carbon, and which goes back into the earth and helps the soil rebuild.
That's it. That's what. So tell people about that, because that's basically, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, tell people about what you do in your products, because you're talking about using our waste, our yard waste, as like a resource,
right? And
being able to like, hey, not only sell like bagged compost from like far away from who knows where, but it's actually like nutrient rich material. How do you do that? First of all, how do you do that? Because that's so amazing. You have all these processes, I'm sure.
Well, the thing is that the thing that you had to realize is that the plants, were not being utilized, and that which is kind of like artificially created a bad thing in a way, because they took a lot of things because they put it into the central waste authority of the municipalities. So they created a what they call a disposal fee, or what they call a tipping fee business out of that. So there's a lot of people that are collecting green waste without the interest of doing anything with it. They're just doing it to get the tipping fee, taking the tipping fee that the government, like everybody in Palm Beach pays a certain amount in their disposal bill for their yard waste pickup on their street, and those things that basically trickles down to these people that are the third party people that the county has to get rid of it through, and without any realization that they're giving it to a person that's not going to do anything with it. What they do is they go basically just take it and just get rid of it somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I was going to ask, is that the case? Because like, how do they? Because first of all, I work with one of our members, who has garden beds, he's all about it.
Yeah.
He works there, and he says they burn most of it and they use it. Like, do you know anything about that?
Well, okay. So when I went to back a few years ago, I met with the head of Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach, and he said that that we couldn't have the yard waste, that the county owned it.
Interesting.
That they owned it legally, that they owned it, which is not possible, because But anyway, so they
But
were.
do they burn it? Like, what do they do?
So they
just-
built an $800 million essentially an incinerator there. They burn all garbage. I don't know whether you know that, but they're just not recycling anymore. They're just burning everything. They're just burning anything. They're not
And you're
recycling.
saying, yeah.
I mean, they come.
So where do you? So you get it from like sugarcane fields. Like, where do you get all your plant
Most of the
matter?
yard waste comes through from solid waste authority and stuff
okay.
because we're showing and demonstrating to them that we can do good things with it.
Awesome.
So we can process more of it, that more of it seems to come our way. You know.
Because I'm just curious, yeah. Because it's like how do they separate the paint from the palm tree?
Oh no, they have the trucks that pick up the yard waste pick up yard waste. You're not supposed to put anything else in there. You say they might some people might put a piece of furniture, but they put that aside and they pick this up with this, and the garbage trucks will pick up. The garbage trucks pick up most everything else, but the green waste is pretty isolated now. You know that they have it has to be 100% vegetation. You know, so they bring that into their site, and then they have to move it out, so they give it to another party under contractual relationships, and then they end up bringing it out to us, you know. So we process about 700,000 yards a year, and we'll probably be over 1 million next year.
Amazing.
And
in Palm Beach County.
Well, we get material from Broward, Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, and Martin County, some from Martin County.
So how big is the site?
Well, we have about 40 acres of just the composting area, and then we have other areas that we're on an old site that used to be an old sugar plant, and so the footing is there for an industrial operation out there, I would call it an agribusiness, and that's what we're classified as, an agribusiness, agricultural business.
Amazing.
And so that's because the production of things of soil and such is an agribusiness, and that's what we do. The idea is that we can produce more as we develop more, and we can develop more technology to do more things with it. That will have, we can, as we're creative and we're more successful and more successful, we'll be able to continue to expand our operations. And so what we're looking at now is to being able to monetize the carbon value that's in our product, because everything that comes from a living plant is basically carbon neutral. It was meant to come into our system and decompose and go back and release to the atmosphere. So that was always part of, all your green waste is carbon neutral. That's why if you burn it in a fire, even though it's releasing the CO2 to the atmosphere, it's carbon neutral. It's not a hydrocarbon which was sequestered under the earth.
Gotcha.
So but you're still adding the CO2. But when you can convert that to carbon and compost and carbon and mix that into a soil matrix together, the carbon and the compost and soil, and then you put that back into the soil that feeds the agricultural. On agricultural lands, on homes, if we were putting that in our homes, and if we were putting it into our yards and our landscapes and our golf courses, and this is where I see that everything, if we were doing this all the way around, we would be reducing many, many things. We wouldn't need the high uses of fertilizer, which is going off, running in nitrates into our coral reefs, which are destroying our coral reefs. So Dr. Brian LaPointe is a good friend of mine. He's the head researcher at Harbor Branch Research. And Dr. LaPointe said that he's been doing over 40 years of research, and that one of the biggest destructive things to our coral reefs off Florida is nitrogen.
Wow.
And nitrogen comes from two ways. It can come off of fertilizer runoff, but it comes from septic tanks. Is one of the biggest ways. Yeah. Well, your urine is a nitrate. So urine come from septic tanks, and septic tanks typically don't operate, are not functioning properly. So they're just discharging waste, and because there's Florida, we're so porous, the water system, this just goes through the aquifer and goes out, and so the nitrates are there. They're in our drinking water. They're in our they go out into our coral reefs, and the coral reefs have been receding or dying, or diminishing, and that's what he's about ready to retire himself and to publish a big report on this.
Wow.
But I think that we could do so much if it starts at the beginning. You have to before you put a lawn down, you just don't throw the sand, you don't throw the grass on top of a just garbage soil. How is that grass going to hold its water? How is it going to? It's going to use more. You're going to burn more water through irrigation. You're going to burn more fertilizer, more chemicals to keep it alive. But if all you did was let a good bed of good organic matter down before you put the soil down, well, my God, you'd have a lawn that uses less fertilizer, less chemicals, less water, everything else,
Right.
and your whole area, it would be much greener, much healthier. So.
I asked earlier. I was trying to I was asking if you're a pioneer, man, because why don't people it's so important, and why don't people understand this stuff? Like grown adults, we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
Don't even understand the breakdown process of soil and all this stuff. Why is it really important? Maybe that's why I'm trying to say because to you it's obvious, hey, let's use this yard waste and not let it,
Well, because it's a natural resource that we got an abundance of, that we don't have to tear apart the earth to go get it. You know what I mean? We don't have to dig it out of the ground.
Mining companies.
Yeah, we don't. Right, we don't have to. It's here. We're growing it in trees. We can recycle all these things. Whether it's the peanut husk, whether it's the almond husks. All the byproducts that come from agriculture. Whether it's the gas, whether it's the sugarcane residues. All this stuff can be recycled and put into and that's how our company name Universal Biocarbon came about. Because in my name, I said, well, universal means we can do so many things with it, right? And biocarbon is what we're dealing with, is a biocarbon. So,
amazing.
So I said, well, that's why I said it's not just it's so important in soil that we can do this so that we have for future generations we have the ability to do that. But more importantly, we're also sequestering carbon. We're reducing CO from the atmosphere, because when you take living carbon from the plants and you put it back into the earth, you bury it back as a soil matrix. Now that's carbon negative because you didn't burn it, it didn't lay in nature, didn't go to the atmosphere again, because now you put it back into the earth, so you resequestered it. And so they know that carbon will stay in soil for millennia, so that's why by doing that, we're putting the carbon, we're building the soil back up. We're not just depleting the soil, we're building the soil. So we need to figure out ways to recycle as much of this green waste residues as we can back into those things, so that we can create, more sustainable landscaping, more sustainable golf courses, because golf courses, are not fully sustainable now, because they basically pour massive amounts of chemicals and fertilizers on golf courses to keep them green,
Could they, with all the work you do, could they be sustainable, do you think?
Well, yeah, I've been trying to get an appointment with. They're building a couple big golf courses in Martin County with Tiger Woods and I think somebody else, Michael Jordan or somebody else. They're building 2 or 3 big golf courses, and I said that they needed to trying to get a meeting with them so that they could basically amend the golf courses before they finish them because that's sand in Martin County up there is horrible soil. Horrible. Yeah. It's just all sandy.
It's Jonathan Dickinson Park.
Yeah, it's just sand and so.
So you're trying to get an appointment with them.
Yeah, so that they could, before they finish the golf, before they lay all the sod down and all the grass down, it's going to be hard to put it in there.
I agree. You should, because they're going to put a lot of fertilizers on that.
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about, man, and tell me if I'm wrong, it's better practices. You know what I mean? Agricultural practices, landscaping practices, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it is.
Absolutely. We need to develop those procedural things within the agricultural market, within the landscape market here. The landscapers are the guys that do all the work.
Yeah.
All they have to do is say to the customer, listen, this is another thing that you can do. For another $100 or another $300 in your lawn, I'm installing this landscaping. It would make sense for another $300 that we put in additional compost and biofertilizers in there, so that your landscape. Now, what owner that's spending maybe $10, $12, $13, $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 on a landscape for their home isn't going to say, yeah, of course I'll spend even another $1,000 or $2,000 for the sustainability, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and the result is better.
Oh my God, the thing is going to be, the flowers are going to be always blooming, the grass is going to be greener, and you're going to be using less irrigation.
David, how much do you like plants? Do you like plants the most out of anybody you know?
I don't know if I like the plants as much. I think I like the idea of the soil and what the biology that's going on in the soil, the whole universe that's down there. There's a whole universe of insects and microorganisms and all that stuff that lives down there that are all basically part of a pyramid that humans are on above, and that we're all. So all those things that are down in the soil will affect us all in the end. You know what I mean? So that's what affects all of the pests. When pesticide, throws everything out of balance. The Earth was created with a balance for everything. You know what I mean? And yeah, there's maybe good things and good things go bad and things that happen in nature and stuff that put the Earth have to put it back into balance again. But, when you start to use a lot of chemicals and disrupt those pesticides and hurt the bees that are so important for propagation, and so how are you going to change that? People should be jumping up and down to change it, But I just don't think that there's any way to get this education. That's why I'm sitting down with you here so we could maybe we can get it out.
That soundbite was it right there, man. That's it, man.
Yeah.
All that soil, that whole soil microbiology,
Yeah.
that whole network, that matrix you're calling it.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. Yeah.
Well, there's a nitrogen fixing bacteria that fastens a node onto the beneficial fungi that fastens itself to the root of the plant that transfers the nitrogen from our air and water to the plants naturally. You know what I mean? No synthetic fertilizers, but those nitrogen-fixing bacteria that form a relationship with the mycorrhizae, that forms the relationship with the plant, which actually carbon is also instrumental in that because the bacteria lives in the carbon. You know what I mean? It's like their whole housing network.
It's like their apartment.
Yeah, it's like their condos. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, we are nerding out on soil, guys. Let's go. That's amazing, though. They take nitrogen. People don't know there's nitrogen in the air.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's going right into that's like from those organisms in the soil. They're making that happen.
Well, that's right. And everybody knows that grass seems to get much greener in the summer, right? I mean, it's not just the rain. We have a lot of electric thunderstorms, and those thunderstorms actually that electricity passing through that extracts the nitrogen from the air, and it gets it mixed into the rainwater. That's why when the rain comes down in the summer, grass grows so prolifically because those rainstorms that are carrying the electricity is actually creating a high nitrogen fertilizer from the air and water. And when there's less of those thunderstorms, you'll find that you don't get that super greening and that growth that you get in the summer.
Yeah, people don't know that lightning fixes nitrogen in the soil.
Yeah.
It's like so beautiful, this creation.
Well, that's kind of like how they produce an ammonium nitrate is a similar process to that. But but no, it's interesting, and so I think that people are starting to get it, and I think big people and big companies. My son got back from New York this week for we had the big things going up in New York the past week, and he came back meeting with some people, and they're big companies have huge carbon footprints. They all your big companies, whether it's Walmart, Microsoft, Amazon, all these, think about Amazon. I mean, their carbon footprint is like all the trucks that are running around and all that stuff. It's massive.
Warehouses.
So they're like seeing okay, this little company Carbon, Universal Biocarbon is carbon negative. So if we can take their carbon, they're not using those carbons and they're not using those credits anyway. So if we can help them in their business, build their business up, then they're going to get and help by them getting the carbon credits from us. They help us encourage our business. This can be the biggest game changer for us. You know what I mean?
Carbon credits.
Yeah, because if they can help with doing that will help diverse our costs down and help us to get the capital that we need to do that and develop the technology. So because the technology is very expensive. The technology, each apparatus is usually about $20 million. So
to process the
green waste. So it's very, very expensive, the whole technological process.
Yeah, David, I wish we could talk all day, man. But real quick, man, tell people about Carbon Pure. Like, what is it and how is it better?
Well, Carbon Pure is just basically you take in the green waste and through a process that I won't get into is that it will break it down to just basically the carbon and the micronutrients that's in plants. So whereas you have compost still contains a lot of the lignins and the woody mass material that's in there, and plant organic matter that's still there. When Carbon Pure basically takes the compost, so to give you a good idea how this would relate to each other, it would take like 10 tons of compost to make 1 ton of Carbon Pure. Because basically when you get rid of all those other things, all you're left with is the macronutrients, the potassium, magnesium, calcium, boron, and iron.
That
So
makes
Carbon
sense
Pure,
because it becomes 10, like organic matter becomes 10% of what it once was, and that's exactly what you're doing.
Right. And so those things, when you have that in your compost, this is why I talked to you about blending the Carbon Pure with yours. So you're giving those available nutrients to the plants, but at the same time you have the compost, which is creating good soil matrix for you. So by blending those two in there, you're sequestering the carbon, but you're also, because 30% of Carbon Pure is pure carbon, the other 70% is all those micronutrients. It's iron, boron, magnesium, all the silicon, all those things that plants need. And like boron and silicon, those are critical to the plant's development and critical to the plant's protecting the plant against insects and disease and stuff like that. So when you're using a fertilizer that only has 3 elements in it, like NPK, it doesn't deliver the plant all those other micronutrients that it needs to build itself strong. Just like, I always tell people, I say, like, you take a 1-a-day vitamin. Well, plants, if you're just giving the plant 3 things, of what you take as a 1-a-day vitamin, what about all the other things that you take, the zinc and all the other things? So how do you expect the plants to be really healthy, especially when you're growing them in soil that's completely devoid of those micronutrients? Right. So you have to find a way. So that's where Carbon Pure comes in. Carbon Pure brings in that whole package of all the it's not that the plant's going to use all of them, because the plants are very selective of what they use and what they need to grow, right?
They all want different things.
And so they basically, this plant might have a little different array of micronutrients than this one does. And because we make this stuff from so many different varieties of plants, that the micronutrients become very blended, and essentially most of the things are the same, but the calcium is in there and those phosphorus, potassium and stuff, and really not much nitrogen at all, because nitrogen's lost in the processing,
Carbon.
But the carbon will take care of the nitrogen fixing bacteria that should take care of the nitrogen requirements,
Guys,
so
it's so deep.
Yeah.
I hope this doesn't go over y'all's heads. But dude, what fascinates me with this is the fact that it's not just that basic fertilizer. It comes from plants. Like you're reusing this yard waste, and it's just like, man, like you're blending. So Carbon Pure, for you guys who don't know, David like sells soil, right? You sell, you sell. Yeah, is that safe to say? And Carbon Pure is like this new fertilizer, but it looks like soil. It's black, like you said, with carbon, and it's just like we should be using those inputs, so we're not killing our coral reefs, Yeah, but it's just so important, guys.
Yeah, that's what we have to do. We have to change. We have to change. And the good thing is that the young people are really beginning to understand that, and even the older people are understanding that, because I was speaking at a garden society the other day, and there was every time I speak to these, whether it's all ages of people, they just go bonkers on this, because they say, I didn't know that. I didn't know that I could get this thing. And there's a lot of things out there that are organic fertilizers, but you have to be really careful, because if it's made from an animal waste, and you're going to use, that's why it's important for me to mention this, is that if you're going to use it for on a garden that you're growing vegetables on, you have to be really careful about that, because there's something that animal waste that can carry, that can create something that can make you very sick, And
even
so
if it's like pasteurized, like these products that we get to.
You wouldn't. I'm very distrusting in that, because pasteurization can always become. It can be if you rush something or you don't put it through the right processes, and that's all it takes is a little bit, and then it happens, and people get it's recalled, and because people have gotten very, very sick and died from it. So I just say that you don't need it.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, man, but your facility, it smells like soil, probably like a forest.
It smells like mulch, or a compost. It just has a clean smell to it. I think.
Man.
But Yeah. So,
Dude, it's good. It's really good stuff. Yeah, it inspires me a lot. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share, man? I want to ask you so many more questions about your facility and what you do. But is there anything that people should know? Anything?
I think I covered a lot. I mean, I could go on forever here, talking about stuff. But
there was like 20 clips in there of like gold, man.
Yeah.
About like, the soil. What was that FDR quote you said?
Yeah, the country that destroys its soil destroys itself. Country destroys its soil, destroys itself.
Let's learn from that one.
And that's
sure.
that's basically. I mean, we have to, change, to do that, and get the big fertilizer companies can be doing this. They can integrate this into their system of supplying fertilizers. We can do that. I've talked to some of those big people, and I've indicated to them that we can do this. That we can integrate what we have into what you're doing, and over time you can start to phase out or follow. Do this as. Because it's always hard to change everything overnight.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Dude.
It's just like they want to change to all electric cars, but how do you change to all electric cars? So you put all these people out of business that are all associated with the
new technologies.
There won't be a Wawa around anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
But
it takes decades.
It takes a long time, and that you can't just you just can't throw everything over in one swoop. But if we can start. Over the next 100 years, we can really, truly change the way that this country does, the way that it eats, and the way because everybody wants safer food. Everybody doesn't want to worry about the chemicals that's in their food. We
talk about that. It doesn't matter what party you're affiliated with. We all want clean water, man.
Yeah,
it's not a partisan issue.
We want healthy food too. We don't want to have to worry about that stuff. We shouldn't have to worry about us buying food that in other countries they ban it. I mean, even Canada bans certain number of our foods. And so it doesn't make sense that we should be feeding it to our people at the same time. There's no need for that when you can produce natural things.
Yeah, it's so key. I mean, how could people get your soil or be a part of this if they are a big company, they want to make change?
Yeah. So, I mean, you go to our website, www.universalbiocarbon.com, and you can kind of see the whole story on there, a lot of it. There's a lot of the story that's on there, a lot about what's going on with it.
We'll put it below.
And you can buy the Carbon Pure in 1 gallon buckets and 5 gallon buckets. You can buy it, which are pretty good way that you can use it because it works good on orchids. That's another interesting. That's one more interesting thing is that Carbon Pure will work on any plants. Any plants. I mean, we have people that use it on orchids, and they say the orchids never stop blooming. And so that's the thing is that it's not so selective for the plant, this plant or that plant. You don't need a different formula for this one or that one.
That.
You just give them everything, and you just say, hey, the plant, you choose what you want. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like the way that the Carbon Pure, since it's made up of all of the micronutrients that's in plants, it gives that array of plants for plants to be able to utilize it that it needs. So, but if you can go on there, you can order bulk, you can do things. So we're setting up a lot of dealers that can order where you want a smaller quantity, 2 yards, 5 yards, 10 yards or something like that. But I think if you call us, we'll be able to get you, somehow we can figure out how to get you the product that you need, and if you're putting in a garden bed, you should be using our product for sure. If you're going to be growing.
We're going to get on a trial this season.
Yeah.
Man. Heck
yeah.
David, you're the man.
All right.
I can't wait to have you again. Let's do this again, man.
We'll have some other things to talk about.
Heck
there's a lot to talk about. Never ending.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you. See you guys next time.
We're in the garden. It's existential.